The air in the basement clings to my skin, heavy, like a shroud woven from forgotten years. I'm 16, lying in the dark, and the clock's red glow burns 3 a.m. into my eyes. Something's wrong. The sheets are too tight, too perfect, as if I've been laid out for a funeral. I didn't make this bed. I didn't touch it. My breath catches, fogging in the air, and the cold it's not winter's bite. It's deeper, older, seeping into my bones like the earth itself is claiming me. Fairbanks, 2008. I'd flown here to save my grandmother's garden, to pull her from the grief that had taken root since my grandfather's death. The house, a relic from the 1950s, squats on the edge of town. Its front yard sprawling so wide, strangers mistake it for a park, but no one stays long. The tundra's scars linger in the bowed floors, the walls that sigh with secrets. My younger cousin and I spent days kneeling in the dirt, coaxing life from wilting stems, but the house never felt right. It watched us, its silence heavier than the Alaskan sky. Grandma had carved a small apartment for me in the basement, a gesture of kindness. 30 steps descend into it, each one narrower than the last, leading to a space that stretches impossibly wide beneath the house. The air down there is stale, trapped, as if it's been holding its breath for decades. Mannequins stand in rows, their glass eyes catching slivers of light. Vintage dolls, their porcelain faces cracked, sit on shelves beside toys from the 1970s, untouched but arranged with care, like offerings to someone who never came back. The apartment itself is cozy wood paneling, a soft bed, a lamp that hums faintly. It felt like freedom at first, a place to be alone. But that was before the night everything changed. I'm not asleep when it happens. My eyes snap open, and the darkness presses against me, thick, alive. The clock's glow is the only anchor, but it's wrong. 3 a.m. Precise, unyielding. I try to move, but my body feels heavy, pinned. The sheets are smooth, tucked tightly around me, corners sharp as if ironed in place. I didn't do this. I thrash, but the fabric holds firm, like hands gripping from below. My breath escapes in, clouds visible, curling in the air. The cold isn't natural. It's not the chill of a Fairbanks winter, not the kind that stings your skin. It's a cold that burrows, that whispers of graves and things long buried. The basement is silent, but it's not the silence of an empty house. It's the absence of life itself. No hum of pipes, no rustle of wind, no groan of settling wood. The stillness is a presence, suffocating, wrapping around me like a second skin. I lie there, staring into the dark, and the shadows in the corners shift. At first, I tell myself it's my imagination, the mannequin's outlines playing tricks. But the longer I look, the more certain I become. Something is there, watching, its gaze a weight on my chest. My heart pounds, each beat louder in the void, and I feel a tan awareness, not human, not alive, but deliberate. It knows I'm here. It wants me to know it's here. You need to move. Get up. Run. The thought cuts through the fog in my mind. Sharp, urgent. I tear the blankets free, my hands trembling, and grab my pillow. The hallway to the stairs is short, 10 feet at most, but it stretches before me, endless, a tunnel of shadow. Every step is a battle, my bare feet slapping against the cold concrete. The air thickens, resisting me, and panic claws at my throat. I don't look back. I can't. The presence is behind me, not chasing, not moving, but there, its attention, a blade against my spine. I reach the stairs, my foot catching on the first step. I fall, pain exploding in my side, but I don't stop. The wood is rough under my hands, splinters biting into my palms. My toes smash against a step, the agony, blinding, but I keep climbing, dragging myself upward. My fingernails tear as I grip the edges, pulling, clawing. The air changes as I cross the threshold to the main floor, the cold retreating like a tide. I stumble to the couch and collapse, my chest heaving, my body shaking. I don't sleep. I can't. The basement's gaze lingers, even here. Morning comes, gray and heavy. Grandma finds me on the couch, her eyes soft with concern. Didn't like it down there, did you? She says, her smile gentle, unknowing. I force a laugh, my voice brittle. Yeah, I just prefer it up here. She nods, doesn't press, and I'm grateful. I don't tell her about the cold, the shadows, the bed that wasn't mine. I don't tell anyone. For years, I convinced myself it was nothing, a long day, a strange dream, a teenager's overactive mind. The basement was creepy, sure, but that's all. I buried it, locked it away. But some things don't stay buried. Years later, I'm sitting in a dark theater, watching The Conjuring. The screen shows a clock stopping at 3 a.m., a room growing colder, a silence that chokes. My heart stumbles, and the basement floods back, the red glow, the fogged breath, the shadows that moved. It's not just a movie, it's my memory, sharp and raw, clawing its way to the surface. I never saw a face, never heard a voice, but I felt it. Something was in that basement, something that wanted me to feel its presence, to know it was watching. I don't know what it was, a ghost, a memory, something older. I only know I'm glad I left before it decided to show me more. Let me tell you about the house though, because it's part of this. Grandma used to talk about it, late at night when the garden was quiet. She said it was built on land that didn't want to be tamed, land that held on to the cold of the tundra even after the floods receded. She'd laugh it off, call it an old woman's fancy. But there was a story she told once, half whispered, about a worker who died during the house's construction. He fell into the foundation, she said, and they never found him. The basement was poured over his bones, sealing him in. I didn't believe it then, just a kid's ghost story. But now, lying awake at night, I wonder, was he the one watching? Was he the cold that held me? I dream about it sometimes. In the dreams, I'm back in the basement, but the stairs are gone. The mannequins turn their heads, their glass eyes following me. The dolls smile, their porcelain lips parting to whisper my name. The cold wraps around me, tighter, pulling me down, and I wake gasping, my breath fogging in the dark. It's not real, I tell myself. It's just a dream, but the line between dream and truth blurs in that house. In that basement, where the shadows never sleep. I never went back down there. I stayed upstairs for the rest of my 3 weeks, sleeping on the couch, avoiding the door to the stairs. Grandma never asked why, and I never told her. The garden bloomed a little, and she smiled more before I left. But the house it didn't let go. It's still there, in my mind, its basement waiting, its cold reaching. Some places don't forget you, some things don't let you forget them. When I was a child, the darkness wasn't just an absence of light, it was a presence, heavy and watchful, that lingered in the corners of our old house. It wasn't the kind of home you'd picture in a horror story, no crumbling Victorian mansion or creaking Gothic spires. It was just an ordinary house, sagging under the weight of decades, with faded paint and a yard overgrown with weeds. But the basement, where my bedroom lay, was something else entirely. It wasn't just a place. It was a boundary, a threshold, where the rules of the world above seemed to unravel, where the air grew thick with secrets that pressed against your skin. I was too young to name the dread that coiled in my chest, but I felt it every time I descended those stairs, my small hand gripping the railing as if it could anchor me to safety. The basement wasn't finished, not in the cozy way you'd imagine, with carpet and warm lights. It was a cavern of concrete and shadows, always a few degrees colder than the rest of the house, even in the sticky heat of summer. The walls were rough, stained with damp patches that looked like faces if you stared too long. My bedroom was a small corner carved out of this gloom, a single bulb dangling from the ceiling, casting a sickly yellow glow that never reached the edges of the room. The rest of the basement stretched beyond my door, a maze of forgotten boxers, rusted tools, and cobwebs that swayed in drafts I couldn't feel. It was a place that felt wrong, as if the house itself was trying to forget it existed, and I was the only one forced to live in its heart. One afternoon, when the world above was bathed in golden sunlight, I sat alone in that basement, surrounded by my toys. The quiet was oppressive, not the peaceful kind you find in a library, but a silence that seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to break it. I was arranging my plastic soldiers in neat rows, their painted faces staring blankly ahead, when a shiver ran through me, not from cold, but from the sudden certainty that I wasn't alone. The air shifted, heavy and electric, like the moment before a storm. My hands froze, a soldier dangling between my fingers, as my eyes darted to the corners of the room. Nothing moved, but the shadows seemed to pulse, darker than they should have been, as if they were drawing closer. And then it happened. My bedroom door, heavy and warped, began to swing open. Not fast, not like someone had pushed it, but slowly, deliberately, as if guided by an unseen hand. The hinges, which always groaned in protest, were silent, and that silence was worse than any sound. It was unnatural, a violation of the house's own rules. My breath caught in my throat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. On the door's glass pane, a small star-shaped decoration, one my sister and I had stuck there years ago, glinted in the dim light. I stared at it, willing it to stay in place, to prove this was just my imagination. But then, as if plucked by invisible fingers, the star peeled away from the glass and fell, landing on the concrete with a soft thud that echoed in my skull. Run! The word screamed in my mind, an embedded command that broke through the fog of fear. I dropped the soldier, my legs moving before I could think, propelling me toward the stairs. The hallway to the staircase was short, maybe 10 feet, but it stretched endlessly before me, the walls closing in like a dream where you can never reach the door. The air grew colder with every step, a chill that sank into my bones, as if the basement itself was reaching for me. I didn't dare look back, but I felt it, a presence, heavy and deliberate, trailing just behind, its gaze boring into the back of my neck. My bare feet slapped against the concrete, each step a desperate plea to escape, until I reached the stairs and scrambled upward, my hands clawing at the wood. When I burst into the kitchen, the warmth of the house above enveloped me like a blanket, but my heart still raced. I found my mom in the living room, folding laundry, her face calm and unaware. Gasping, I tried to explain what I'd seen: the door, the star, the feeling of being watched, but the words tumbled out in a jumble, incoherent, even to me. To my surprise, she didn't laugh or dismiss me. Her eyes softened, and she set down the shirt she was folding. "Let's go look," she said, her voice steady but laced with something I couldn't name. Together, we descended into the basement, her hand on my shoulder. Every light switched on as we went. The room looked the same, my toys scattered, the star on the floor, the door ajar, but the air felt different now, lighter, as if whatever had been there had retreated, waiting for another chance. That wasn't the only time the basement revealed its secrets. Over the years, it became a constant presence in our lives, a shadow that followed us even when we tried to ignore it. I'd catch myself avoiding the basement door, hesitating at the top of the stairs, my body remembering what my mind tried to forget. The feeling of being watched never left, especially when I was alone. It was as if the walls themselves had eyes, hidden in the cracks, peering out from the darkness. I'd lie in bed at night, the bulb's faint glow, my only comfort, and imagine shapes moving just beyond its reach, formless, yet alive, waiting for me to acknowledge them. One evening, years after that first incident, my family gathered around the dining table. The warmth of our meal, a stark contrast to the basement's chill. My parents were talking about something mundane, bills maybe, or a neighbor's new car when my dad's face changed. His eyes widened, his fork hovering midair, as if he'd seen something impossible. My mom noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. He didn't speak, just pointed at the table. We all turned, and there it was, a bottle of Tabasco. One my dad kept on the table for his eggs, sliding slowly across the wood, not tipping, not rolling, but moving as if guided by an invisible hand, deliberate and controlled. It stopped at the edge, perfectly still, as if daring us to react. No one spoke. The silence that followed was thicker than the basement's, heavy, with questions we didn't want to ask. My mom's face paled, but she didn't say a word until years later, when she admitted the truth. She'd heard things, 2 footsteps in the basement, when the house was empty, pacing back and forth in the dark, measured and deliberate. The basement door would open and close on its own, not once or twice, but often, as if someone were coming and going. She'd try to ignore it, to convince herself it was just the house settling, but the air down there felt wrong, like it was holding something that didn't belong. One night, my mom reached her breaking point. The pressure in the basement had grown unbearable, a weight that seemed to press against her chest whenever she went down there. She told me later that it wasn't just the sounds or the door, it was the feeling that whatever was there knew her, watched her, and wanted her to know it was there. She couldn't take it anymore. In the dead of night, with the house silent above, she descended into the basement alone, no lights, just the faint hum of the furnace in the distance. Standing in the center of the room, she felt the darkness close in, a sensory overload of cold air, stale smells, and the prickling of her skin. But she stood tall, her voice steady as she spoke into the void. "I don't know what you are, but you're not welcome here. I belong to Jesus Christ, and this house is protected. Leave." It was a moment of defiance, a nested storytelling anchor that shifted the house's energy. When she spoke those words, it was as if the basement exhaled, the weight lifting like a storm breaking. The door stopped opening. The footsteps faded. The air, though still cold, no longer felt alive with malice. We never learned what it was, a ghost, something darker, or just the house's own pain trapped in its foundations. But I still think about that door, swinging open in silence. About the star falling as if pulled. About the Tabasco bottle sliding, with purpose. It didn't want to be seen, but it wanted us to know it was there, testing how far it could go before we pushed back. Years later, as an adult, I visited a friend's house with a basement, much like ours, dim, unfinished, with that same heavy air. As I stood at the top of the stairs, my body froze, my heart racing with a fear I thought I'd outgrown. The darkness below seemed to whisper my name, pulling me back to that moment when the door opened and the world I knew unraveled. I turned away, my breath shallow, and vowed never to step into a basement again. Some things, once felt, never leave you. They linger, like shadows in the corners, waiting for the light to fade. The winter of 2010 wasn't kind to me. I'd come home to an empty house, the kind that holds its breath when you walk through the door, waiting for something to break the silence. That afternoon, the light outside was fading, a pale gray that made the world feel half asleep. I dropped my bag, sank into my chair, and let the hum of my computer fill the void. But then, from the depths below, a sound crept up, soft, metallic, deliberate. It was the kind of sound that makes you question whether you heard it at all, or if your mind is playing tricks in the quiet. I was alone, or so I thought. Between 2008 and 2014, I lived in my father's house, a place that never felt like mine. He'd moved in with his girlfriend, leaving behind an echo of his presence, his old jackets in the closet, his coffee mugs in the sink, his habits etched into the walls. The house was too big for one person, its rooms too still, its shadows Too long. My father and his girlfriend would drop by unannounced, grabbing mail or doing laundry. Their visits brief, but enough to remind me the house still belonged to them. That day, though, the parking lot was empty. No cars, no signs of life. Just me, the fading light, and the quiet. I settled into my routine, headphones on, the screen's glow, a small comfort. The world outside dimmed, and the house seemed to settle into itself, the way old houses do when night creeps closer. But then it came again, a faint clunk from the basement, sharp enough to cut through the music. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. It was the sound of the washing machine door, unmistakable, followed by the dull thud of wet clothes being tossed inside. My heart gave a slow, heavy thud. I knew that sound. My father's girlfriend always did laundry when she visited her. Movements precise, almost ritualistic. The click of the cycle knob followed, each turn deliberate, and then the low rumble of the dryer vibrated through the floor, a pulse that seemed to sync with my own. I pulled off my headphones, the music fading into a distant hum. Listen closely now. The sounds were too real, too specific. The dryer's familiar hitch at startup, the way it groaned before settling into its rhythm, it was all there, as if she were down there, folding clothes, moving through her routine. But I'd checked the lot. No one was here. My mind scrambled for logic. Maybe Dad dropped her off. Maybe she's here while he's out. It wouldn't be the first time. I told myself to relax, to let the sounds fade into the background. But they didn't stop. They grew, layering over one another, pulling me deeper into their rhythm. The dryer's hum softened, replaced by the shuffle of fabric, the soft scrape of clothes being folded. I could almost see her hands, smoothing out shirts, stacking them neatly. Then came the creak of the plastic laundry basket shifting, followed by a slow, dragging sound across the tiled basement floor. Feel the weight of it. The basket moved as if pulled by someone careful, someone who didn't want to disturb the house. My breath caught, shallow and uneven. The sounds were no longer just sounds, they were a presence, a story unfolding below me, and I was part of it, whether I wanted to be or not. And then the stairs. Each step groaned under a measured weight, the kind of sound that makes you picture someone climbing slowly, deliberately, as if they know the house is listening. The basement stairs were old, their wood warped from years of use, and every creak was a betrayal, announcing the ascent. I turned in my chair, eyes locked on the stairwell. The footsteps grew closer, each one heavier, more certain. They're almost here. My pulse hammered in my throat, a drumbeat urging me to move, to run, to do anything but sit and wait. The landing was just beyond my view. One more step, and I'd see her face, her familiar smile. And this would all be nothing, a silly moment of panic. But no one came. The footsteps stopped on the final step, the silence that followed thicker than any sound. You're still waiting, aren't you? I stared at the empty stairwell, my eyes straining for movement, for a shadow, for anything to break the stillness. The air grew heavy, pressing against my skin like a cold tide. My limbs felt tight, as if the room itself were holding me in place. I stood, legs trembling, and crept toward the stairs. The dim light from the hallway cast long, jagged shadows, and every step felt like a descent into something I couldn't name. The stairwell yawned below, a dark throat leading to the basement. I hesitated, my hand gripping the railing, the wood cold under my palm. Go down, you have to know. The urge to check battled the dread pooling in my chest. I descended, each step resisting me, as if the house itself were warning me to turn back. The basement air was stale, heavy with the scent of damp concrete and old detergent. The machines sat in the corner, silent sentinels in the dim light. I reached out, my hand trembling, and pressed it against the dryer. It was ice cold, not just cool, not just idle for an hour cold like it hadn't run in days, maybe weeks. The metal seemed to pulse under my touch, or perhaps that was my own heartbeat, frantic and unsteady. You heard it all, didn't you? The washing machine was empty, its door closed tight. No clothes, no basket, no sign of anyone. The tiles were clean, untouched, no drag marks, no footprints. I backed away, my stomach twisting, the weight of the silence crushing me. I had heard its every sound, every step, every moment of that impossible routine. It wasn't in my head. It was too real, too precise, too alive. I stumbled back to the stairs, my legs heavy, as if wading through water. The memory of the footsteps lingered, their rhythm burned into my mind. They were right behind you. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking as I dialed my father. His voice was calm, distant, a lifeline to the rational world. "Dad, was anyone at the house today?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He laughed, confused. "No, we're on vacation. Been gone a week. 4 hours away. You know that." His words were a blade, cutting through any hope of explanation. No one had a key. No one could have been here, but you heard it. That night, I packed every belonging I had in the basement: clothes, books, my old guitar, and dragged them upstairs. The basement door stayed closed, a boundary I wouldn't cross alone. I kept the lights on, the TV blaring, anything to drown out the silence that might let those sounds return. The house was sold years later, its secrets buried in the sale. I never told the new owners. What could I say? The laundry room lives its own life down there. Good luck. Let me tell you about my cousin Anna. She lived in a house not unlike mine, an old place with a basement that seemed to breathe. One night, she woke to the sound of her piano playing a soft, halting melody, like someone testing the keys. She crept downstairs, her heart pounding, only to find the piano silent, its lid closed. The next night, it played again, louder, more insistent. She called me, her voice trembling, asking if I believed in ghosts. I didn't know what to say. I'd heard my own sounds, felt my own dread. Some houses don't let you go. Years later, I still feel it, the weight of that afternoon, the cold of the dryer, the footsteps that never reached the top. You feel it too, don't you? The house is gone, but its memory clings to me, a shadow that stirs when I'm alone in the quiet. I don't know what was down there, but I know what I didn't see. And sometimes, that's the worst part of all. It started with a scent: laundry detergent, sharp and floral, curling through the air like a memory that wasn't mine. I stood frozen in my Aunt Renee's basement, a basket of clothes clutched against my chest, the hum of the washer filling. The silence. The air was too thick, pressing against my skin, as if the walls themselves were breathing. This wasn't the kind of place you'd expect to feel like a trap. It was modern, clean, with bright lights and soft carpet. But something was wrong. Something was watching me, and it wasn't human. My name is still etched in that moment. A 20-year-old kid, house-sitting for my aunt, in her Colorado home, unaware that the basement held a secret, named Baba Secret, that would claw its way into my soul. Renee's house was a haven, or so I thought. Nestled in a quiet Colorado neighborhood, it was all warm wood floors, and sunlight spilling through wide windows. She'd bought it years ago with Sandy, her partner, a man whose laugh could fill a room. The basement was there, finished space with white walls, a home gym where Renee lifted weights, and an office where she pored over legal briefs as a criminal defense attorney. There was a corner, though, where the carpet gave way to cold cement, a nook for the washer and dryer tucked under shelves of detergent and folded towels. It was practical, well lit, unremarkable. But every time I stepped down those stairs, my heart would stutter, like it knew something I didn't. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks, and the hairs on my arms would rise, whispering of a presence I couldn't see. I'd been house-sitting for a week, tending to Renee's plants and feeding her cat, when the basement started to unravel me. The first time I went down to do laundry, I felt it a subtle pressure, like eyes boring into the back of my neck. I was sorting clothes, the mundane rhythm of it grounding me, when a wave of cold swept through, not from the air, but from within, like my bones had turned to ice. I turned, expecting nothing, but the emptiness was worse. The lights flickered, just a heartbeat, and the shadows in the corner seemed to shift, stretching toward me. I laughed it off, told myself it was the isolation of house sitting, but my hands shook as I shoved clothes into the washer. You're being ridiculous, I thought, but the thought felt hollow, like a lie I was trying to believe. Days later, I had to go back. The washer's done, I told myself, forcing my feet down the stairs. I was 4 feet 11 inches, too short to reach the washer's drum without leaning in, my body half swallowed by the machine. The basement was silent, but the silence was alive, pressing against my eardrums. As I scooped out wet clothes, the air grew heavy, like someone was standing inches behind me, their breath grazing my neck. Don't look back, my mind screamed, but the urge was overwhelming. I spun around, heart hammering, and saw nothing but the empty gym equipment and the neat rows of Renee's files. The relief was fleeting. It's still here, I thought, and the dread sank deeper, rooting me to the spot. I grabbed the clothes, my movements clumsy, and bolted upstairs, the door slamming behind me. My breath came in gasps, and I swore I'd never go down there again. That night, Renee came home, her presence a balm to my frayed nerves. Over coffee, I mentioned the basement, trying to sound casual, like I was joking about my overactive imagination. It feels weird down there, like someone's watching, I said, forcing a laugh. Renee's eyes met mine, steady and unblinking. Oh, that's Bob, she said, her voice calm, like she was talking about a neighbor. He's been around for years. He's mean, likes to scare people, but he mostly stays in the basement. Sometimes he wanders to the bedroom, but he's harmless if you ignore him. Harmless. The word felt like a betrayal. She explained that Sandy, her partner, had named the entity Bob, a way to make it less terrifying. Sandy always said if he went first, he'd take Bob with him, she added, a wistful smile on her lips. I nodded, but the name Bob didn't make the basement feel any safer. It gave the darkness a face, and that was worse, let me tell you, about Sandy. He was a forestall, with a grin that could disarm anyone, and a third-degree black belt in Kempo karate. He and Renee were a team, their love a quiet strength that held the house together. When I was a kid, I'd watch them dance in the living room, Renee laughing as Sandy spun her under the glow of a cheap lamp. They were my proof that love could be real, but life has a way of breaking things. A few years after that house-sitting summer, Sandy and Renee were riding their motorcycle through the mountains. The road turned slick with gravel, and the bike skidded. Renee walked away with a sprained ankle and bruises, but Sandy didn't make it. The news hit like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. I couldn't imagine Renee without him. Couldn't imagine the house without his laughter. Renee returned to the house alone, the silence deafening. A few days later, she was in the living room, staring at nothing, when the air shifted. Upstairs, it began. A cacophony erupted from there. Bedroom thuds, crashes, the scrape of furniture being dragged across the floor. It wasn't random. It was violent, like a fight between titans. Renee froze, her heart pounding, as the sounds grew louder, the walls trembling with each impact. Is this Bob? She wondered, but the thought felt wrong. This was different, purposeful. She climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last, and pushed open the bedroom door. The room was chaos, paper scattered, blankets twisted into knots, a lamp toppled over. Nothing was broken, but everything was wrong. And then, silence. The air felt lighter, cleaner, like a storm had passed. Renee stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, because she knew. Sandy had kept his promise. Bob was gone, or so she thought. But the story doesn't end there. A year and a half later, Renee had rebuilt her life. She had a new boyfriend, 2 young stepsons, and a spark in her eyes I hadn't seen since Sandy. I was still babysitting for her, spending afternoons in the house while she worked in the basement office or went to court. One day, the boys were napping upstairs, and I was on the couch, lost in a book. The front door was in my line of sight, a hook by the frame holding Sandy's old flannel shirt. Renee wore it sometimes, said it felt like a hug from him. I glanced up, and my world stopped. There was Sandy, standing by the door, pulling on a shoe. Not a ghost, not a shadow. He was solid, real, the flannel's red checks vivid against his frame. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, time dissolved. We nodded, a silent pact, and then he was gone. No fade, no blur, just gone, like he'd stepped through a door I couldn't see. The flannel hung untouched on the hook at dinner. I told Renee, my voice trembling. She listened, her fork still, her eyes distant. "I've never seen him," she said softly, "but I know he's here." She described moments that felt like Sandy, the bed dipping, as if someone lay beside her, a warmth against her back, like his embrace. "He's happy. I'm moving on," she said. "He told me once, if anything happened, he wanted me to keep living, to be loved." I felt a lump in my throat, the weight of his absence and presence colliding. Sandy was still fighting for her, even from beyond. Now Renee lives in Texas with Matt, her husband, near the beach they always dreamed of. She says Sandy's still there, in the cry of blue herons overhead, in the unexpected strum of their song, on the radio, in the warm breeze that feels like his touch. Bob never came back. But I still think about that basement, the way it held me in its grip, the way Bob's presence lingered like a predator waiting for weakness. I wonder if Sandy's fight was enough to banish him forever, or if he's still there, in some corner of that house, waiting for someone new to scare. Every time I smell laundry detergent, I'm back there, feeling the cold, the eyes, the truth that some things never leave. At 10 years old, I believed houses were just places, wood and brick, floors and walls, nothing more. But the house of my great-grandfather taught me otherwise. It stood alone at the edge of a dirt road, its sagging roof and clouded windows watching us like an old man who'd seen too much. The air around it was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and forgotten years. When my family moved in, I felt it immediately, a presence, not alive but not dead, lingering in the shadows, waiting to be noticed. We were between homes, my parents said, just staying here until we found somewhere permanent. My great-grandfather had moved to a nursing home, leaving the house empty, or so we thought. From the moment I crossed the threshold, I knew it wasn't empty. The air clung to my skin, cold and sticky, like stepping into a room where someone had just left but never really gone. The floorboards groaned under my sneakers, not with age, but with reluctance, as if they resented our presence. My parents didn't seem to notice, or maybe they chose not to. They were too busy unpacking boxes, talking about bills, and pretending everything was fine. But I was 10, and I saw what they ignored. The house had rules, unspoken but absolute. We could live on the first floor and use the basement for storage, laundry, whatever we needed. The second floor was off limits. My mother's voice was sharp when she told us, her eyes flicking to the staircase that led up to a heavy wooden door, its paint peeling like dead skin. "Don't go up there," she said, and that was it. No explanation, no reason, just a command that hung in the air, like a warning. I was curious, of course. What kid wouldn't be? But every time I stood at the foot of that staircase, my stomach twisted, and a cold sweat prickled my neck. I'd turn away, pretending I didn't care, but I did. I cared too much. That door, that had a mind of its own. Every night, it was locked tight. The bolt slid firmly in place. Every morning, It was open, just a crack, enough to show a sliver of darkness beyond. I noticed it first, creeping downstairs for breakfast, my eyes drawn to that gap. I'd push it shut, my hands trembling, but the next day, it would be open again. I asked my parents if they'd done it, maybe checking something upstairs, but they shook their heads. Old houses settle, my father said, but his voice was tight, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. My mother just changed the subject. I stopped asking, but I never stopped watching that door. The basement was worse. If the second floor was a mystery, the basement was a nightmare. It wasn't like the basements in books or movies, with cozy rugs or bright lights. This one was a cavern, deep and dark, with a ceiling so low it felt like it was pressing down on you. 2 lights worked, one at the top of the stairs, flickering like it was about to die, and one in the main room, a bare bulb dangling from a cord. The light didn't reach the corners, where shadows pooled like ink. Side rooms branched off, each sealed with heavy wooden doors, their handles rusted and cold. I never opened them. I didn't need to. I could feel something behind them, something that didn't want me there. Every trip to the basement was a test of courage. The air down there was different, thick, almost solid, like walking through water. It smelled of mold, and something sharper, like metal left out in the rain. I'd run down, grab whatever my parents needed, and sprint back up, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I told myself it was just a creepy old house, that I was being silly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It wasn't just the silence, though that was bad enough. It was the way the silence felt alive, watching, waiting. I remember the day it happened, as clear as if it were yesterday. It was a warm afternoon, the kind where sunlight spills through windows and makes everything feel safe. I was in the living room, sprawled on the floor with a comic book, when my mother called from the kitchen. "Can you grab a pack of meat from the freezer in the basement?" Her voice was casual, but my stomach dropped. I wanted to say no, to beg her to send someone else, but I saw the way she looked at me, expectant, impatient. I didn't want to be the scared kid who couldn't handle a simple task. So I nodded, my mouth dry, and headed for the basement door. The stairs creaked under my weight. Each step a warning I ignored. The light at the top flickered, casting jagged shadows on the walls. I gripped the handrail, my palms slick with sweat, and forced myself to keep going. The air grew colder with every step, wrapping around me like a shroud. By the time I reached the bottom, I was shivering, though I told myself it was just the basement's chill. I had to believe that, because the alternative was too terrifying to consider. The freezer was at the far end of the main room, next to one of those heavy side doors. I hated that spot. The door had a gap at the bottom, just wide enough to let darkness seep through, and sometimes I swore I saw movement in that gap, something shifting, watching. I shook my head, trying to focus, and hurried to the freezer. The lid was heavy, and when I lifted it, a blast of cold air hit my face, sharp and biting. I rummaged through the frozen packages, my fingers numb, my breath fogging in the dim light. Everything was fine, I told myself. Just grab the meat and get out. Then it happened. A sound, sharp and deliberate, came from the side room behind me. It was like a piece of furniture falling, heavy and solid, shaking the floor beneath my feet. I froze, my hands still in the freezer, the cold burning my skin. My heart slammed against my ribs, so loud I thought it would drown out everything else. But it didn't. The silence that followed was worstic, oppressive, like the house was holding its breath, waiting for me to move. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a box had fallen, or an old shelf had collapsed. I wanted to believe it was nothing, but my body knew better. My skin prickled, and every nerve screamed that I wasn't alone. I forced myself to keep looking, to pretend I hadn't heard it, but my hands were shaking so badly, I dropped a package. It hit the floor with a dull thud, and I bent to pick it up. my eyes darting to that cursed door. That's when I heard them footsteps. Slow at first, deliberate, like someone testing the floor. They came from the side room, each one heavier than the last, echoing in the empty space. My breath caught in my throat, and I stood, the package forgotten. The footsteps grew faster, louder, no longer cautious but purposeful. They were coming for me. Panic took over. I slammed the freezer shut and ran, my sneakers slipping on the concrete floor. The footsteps followed, matching my pace, growing closer with every second. I could feel them, not just hear them, a presence, massive and relentless, chasing me through the dark. I reached the stairs, my legs burning, and scrambled up, my hands clawing at the handrail. The footsteps were right behind me, so close I could almost feel a hand reaching for my back. I hit the basement door and yanked the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was like someone was holding it shut, pressing against it from the other side. I pulled harder, screaming, my voice raw and desperate. The footsteps stopped, but the silence was worse. I felt it, something standing there, inches away, its presence so heavy it crushed the air from my lungs. I pounded on the door, tears streaming down my face, begging for it to open. And then, like a miracle, it did. The door flew open, and I stumbled through, collapsing onto the kitchen floor. I scrambled to my feet, slamming the door shut behind me, my chest heaving. I stared at the door, waiting for something to follow. But there was nothing, just silence, cold and absolute. The house was still again, but it wasn't calm. It was waiting. I ran to my mother, sobbing, the words tumbling out in a mess of fear and panic. I told her about the sound, the footsteps, the door that wouldn't open. She held me, her arms tight, but I saw the worry in her eyes. She didn't say much, just stroked my hair and told me I was safe now. But I wasn't. I knew I wasn't. My father checked the basement that evening. He went down with a flashlight, his face set in that determined way he had when he wanted to prove something. He opened every door, checked every corner, but found nothing. No fallen shelves, no footprints, no sign of anything out of place. "It's just an old house," he said, but his voice was hollow, and he avoided the basement after that. I refused to go down there alone again. Even during the day, with sunlight streaming through the windows, I couldn't bring myself to face those stairs. The memory of those footsteps haunted me. Their rhythm burned into my mind. I'd lie awake at night, listening for them, convinced they'd come for me again. The door to the second floor kept opening, too, every morning, a silent reminder that the house wasn't done with us. We moved out a few months later, to a new place with bright lights and no basement. But the house of my great-grandfather stayed with me. Even now, as an adult, I can't walk down a dark staircase without feeling that cold breath on my neck, without hearing those footsteps in my mind. I don't know what was in that basement. What chased me that day? A ghost? Something worse? All I know is that it was real, and it wanted me to know it was there. Some houses are just houses. Others are alive, and they never let you forget it. A house so quiet it feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for you to notice something you shouldn't. That's where I was. A kid caught in a moment that would haunt me for decades. I was the youngest in my family, the easy target for my older siblings' pranks, especially my brother, 9 years my senior. He was obsessed with Scream the movie, The Mask, the whole chilling vibe. Every Halloween, he'd slip into that tattered black robe, grip a plastic knife that glinted under the porch light, and pull on that white, twisted mask with its gaping, screaming mouth. To him it was a game, a way to make me shriek and sprint to Mom. To me, it was terror, pure and sharp, carving itself into my childhood. But what happened that one afternoon wasn't his game. It was something else, something that still makes my skin crawl when I close my eyes. Our house wasn't old, but it had secrets, corners that felt too heavy, too watched. The basement was the worst. It wasn't just a room. It was a void, a place where light seemed to give up. The concrete walls swallowed sound, and the air always carried a damp, metallic temps like rust or blood. I'd always hurry through it, my heart thumping, convinced something was just behind me, waiting for me to turn around. That day, the house felt different too still, like the world outside had paused. Mom was home, folding laundry in the living room, her hands moving rhythmically, the only sign of life in the silence. My siblings were out, and Dad was working late. It was just us, the house, and that oppressive quiet. Feel the weight of that moment, the way the air presses against your chest. Mom handed me a stack of my brother's clothes, jeans, t-shirts, the faint smell of his cologne clinging to them. "Take these to his room," she said, her voice soft but firm. His room was in the basement, down 2 flights of creaking stairs. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the fabric. "Do I have to?" I asked, my voice small. The basement wasn't just a place I disliked, it was a place I feared, a place that seemed to know me too well. Mom gave me that look, the one that said I was being silly but she'd humor me. "Come on, I'll time you. See how fast you can go." It was her way of making it a game, but it didn't feel like one. I swallowed, hard nodded, and headed for the stairs. The basement door was heavy, its hinges groaning as I pushed it open. The air hit me first cold, thick, like stepping into a freezer. The stairs descended into shadow, each step narrower than the last, the wood warped and uneven. I clutched the clothes tighter, my knuckles white, and started down. The lights overhead buzzed, casting a sickly yellow glow that barely reached the corners. Every step echoed, too loud, like the house was mocking me. I tried to focus on the task: get to his room, drop the clothes, get out. But the basement had other plans. Halfway down, I froze. The air shifted, grew heavier, like someone had stepped into the room with me. I glanced around, my breath catching, but there was nothing, just the concrete walls, the dusty shelves, the faint hum of the water heater in the distance. You've felt that, haven't you? That moment when you know you're not alone, but you can't prove it. I shook it off, told myself it was just my imagination, and kept going. My brother's room was at the far end, past a maze of boxers and old furniture. The door was ajar, a sliver of darkness peeking through. I pushed it open, the hinges silent for once, and stepped inside. His room was a mess, posters of horror movies on the walls, clothes strewn across the floor, the faint glow of a lava lamp in the corner. I tossed the clothes onto his bed, my hands shaking, and turned to leave. That's when I saw it. Stop. Picture this. You're alone, and something impossible is staring right at you. At the top of the stairs, blocking the only way out, stood a figure. It was Scream, the black robe trailing to the floor, the white mask tilted slightly, its hollow eyes fixed on me. It didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, a silhouette against the dim light from the hallway above. My heart stopped. My lungs refused to work. I knew that mask, had seen it 100 times when my brother chased me through the house, laughing as I screamed. But this wasn't him. This was different. The stillness, the silence, it wasn't human. It was wrong. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the clothes forgotten on the bed. The mask seemed to pulse in the faint light, its expression twisting, mocking. I wanted to scream, to call for Mom, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the basement's oppressive air. "Run, you have to run." My mind screamed, but my body wouldn't listen. The figure didn't move, but I felt it watching, its gaze boring into me, peeling away my courage layer by layer. And then, something shifted. The air grew colder, sharper, like a blade against my skin. I don't know how I broke free. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was fear, so raw it overrode everything else. But I ran. Not toward the stairs. That was the mistake. I ran deeper into the basement, my feet pounding against the concrete, my breath ragged. I didn't think, Didn't plan, just moved, driven by a primal need to escape. The basement stretched on, a labyrinth of shadows and forgotten things. I ducked behind the water heater, its low hum vibrating through my chest. I crouched there, my knees pulled tight, my hands clamped over my mouth to stifle the sobs. My heart was a drum, each beat loud enough to betray me. It's coming, I thought, my mind spiraling. I waited, listening for footsteps, for the rustle of that robe. But there was nothing, just the hum of the heater and the weight of my own terror. Let me take you back, just for a moment, to another time I felt this fear. When I was younger, maybe 4, my brother had hidden in my closet, wearing that same mask. I'd opened the door, expecting toys, and there he was, looming, the mask glowing in the dark. I'd screamed so loud Mom had come running, scolding him while I clung to her. That was a game, a cruel one, but it had rules, boundaries. This wasn't that. This was something else, something that didn't belong in our house, in our world. The memory anchored me, kept me from dissolving into panic, but it also made the moment sharper, more real. If this wasn't my brother, then what was it? Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time didn't work right down there. The basement was silent, but it wasn't empty. I felt it, that presence, lingering just out of sight. I pictured the figure moving, through the shadows, its robe brushing the floor, its mask tilting as it searched for me. You're safe here, just stay still, I told myself, but I didn't believe it. The water heater's hum became a lifeline, a reminder of the world above, but even that felt fragile, like it could stop any second. I don't know how long I stayed there, curled into myself, my breath shallow, my eyes darting to every shadow. Eventually, I heard something, Mom's voice, faint but clear, calling my name. I didn't move at first, didn't trust it. What if it wasn't her? What if it was the thing, mimicking her, luring me out? But she called again, sharper, worried. Where are you? I crawled out, my limbs stiff, my heart still racing. The basement looked the same: boxes, shelves, the faint glow of the lights, but it felt different, like the air had shifted, like something had retreated, but not left. I ran to the stairs, my feet slipping on the concrete, and there was Mom, standing at the top, her face pale. She scooped me up, her arms warm against my trembling body, and asked what happened. I tried to explain, the words tumbling out: scream, the mask, the stairs, but they felt inadequate, like they couldn't capture the horror. She searched the house, her footsteps loud in the silence, but found nothing. No robe, no mask, no sign of anyone. She called for my brother, thinking he'd snuck in to scare me, but the house was empty. Later, we learned he'd been out all day, playing with friends miles away. Mom's eyes changed then, a flicker of doubt, of fear, crossing her face. That night, she walked through the house with a bundle of sage, its smoke curling into the air, thick and bitter. She stood in the living room, her voice steady but fierce, and said, "You're not welcome here. This is our home. There's no room for you. Leave." I watched from the couch, clutching a blanket, the sage's scent burning my nose. The house felt lighter after, like it had exhaled, but I never trusted it again. We moved a year later, to a new house in the mountains, for Dad's job. The new place was bright, open, nothing like the old one, but I carried that moment with me. Close your eyes and see it: the stairs, the mask, the silence. 23 years later, I'm an adult, with a job, a life, but I can't shake it. I don't believe in ghosts, not really, but I believe in what I saw. It wasn't my brother, it wasn't a prank. It was something else, something that knew my fear and wore it like a mask. Every time I'm alone in a quiet house, I check the stairs. Every time I see that movie, that mask, my chest tightens. You're still there, aren't you? I don't know what it was, but it knows me, and I'll never forget its face. A perfect summer day. The kind where the sun burns so bright, it erases every shadow, every fear, every whisper of the unknown. You're a kid, lost in the rhythm of a bouncing basketball, the world reduced to the thud of rubber on concrete. Nothing can touch you. Nothing can break that spell, until something does, a shadow that shouldn't exist. A figure that defies reason, stepping out of the light into a darkness you didn't know was there. My name is nobody's business, but that day, when I was barely tall enough to reach the hoop, I learned that some things don't need names to haunt you. They just need to be seen. It was noon, the sky a flawless blue, stretched tight over our suburban neighborhood. I was outside, alone, the basketball my only companion. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass, and the heat pressed against my skin, heavy but comforting. My brother, 10 years my senior, was upstairs, probably sprawled across his bed with a comic book. My sister and cousin, both a few years older, were in the basement, scribbling on a chalkboard, their laughter faint through the open windows. The world felt safe, predictable, like a song I knew every note to. I dribbled, aimed, missed, chased the ball, and started again, my sneakers scuffing the driveway. Nothing could go wrong on a day like this. But what if the wrong thing wasn't outside, waiting for dusk? What if it was already inside, watching, moving, choosing its moment? The back door swung open, and my brother's voice cut through the haze. He was furious, his face flushed, eyes narrowed. "Get inside, now. You didn't ask to be out here." I froze, the ball rolling away, my stomach twisting. He was always strict, but this felt different, sharper, like he was scared of something he wouldn't name. I trudged toward the house, the laundry room just beyond the door. It's cool. Tiled floor, a stark contrast to the sun-soaked driveway. The basement stairs loomed to the left, descending into a dimness that always made me hesitate. I stood there, half listening to his lecture, my eyes darting to the shadows. You ever feel it? That prickle on your neck, the sense that something's just out of sight, waiting for you to notice. I did, right then, and it wasn't my brother's anger making my skin crawl. That's when I saw it. A shape, tall and wrong, moving past the corner of my vision, deliberate, unhurried, like it owned the space. My breath caught, my body locked in place. It wasn't human, not quite. It was dark, furred, its limbs long and sinewy, like a gorilla's, but it stood upright, its posture rigid, almost regal. And it was dressed, God help, in a marching band uniform, the kind you'd see in a parade, all crisp navy fabric and gleaming brass buttons. A tall, plumed hat sat atop its head, and a massive drum was strapped to its chest, the white surface gleaming dully in the half-light. It didn't look at me. It didn't pause. It just moved, slow and silent, toward the bathroom that connected the laundry room to the rest of the basement. The silence was the worst part. Not a creak, not a rustle, just a void where sound should have been. Like the world held its breath. I tried to speak, my voice a strangled whisper. There's something in the bathroom. Look, my brother. Didn't hear me, didn't care. His words a relentless drone about responsibility. I wanted to grab him, shake him, make him see, but my limbs felt heavy, like I was sinking into the floor. Have you ever seen something so impossible you doubted your own eyes, even as it burned itself into your mind? The figure vanished into the bathroom, the door half open, its shadow swallowed by the darkness within. I stared, waiting for it to reappear, to explain itself. But there was nothing, just the hum of the house and my brother's voice, now distant, like it was coming from another room. Then it happened. A scream, sharp, raw, my sister's voice tearing through the basement, walls. "Something's in the bathroom," she shouted, her words trembling with panic. My stomach dropped, a cold wave crashing over me. She saw it too. She couldn't have heard me. The walls were too thick, the distance too great. My brother stopped mid-sentence. his face shifting from anger to confusion. My sister's voice came again, frantic, pointing toward the bathroom. It went into the shower. My cousin, braver than any of us, stormed toward the door, yanking the curtain back. I held my breath, expecting, what? A monster? A ghost? But there was nothing, just the chipped tiles, the rusted showerhead, the empty tub. No footprints, no trace, no sign of the thing that had marched through our house like it belonged there. We stood there, the four of us, the air thick with unspoken fear. My sister was pale, her hands shaking as she clutched my cousin's arm. It was tall, she whispered like an animal, but dressed up. It had a drum. My brother scoffed, but his eyes darted to the bathroom, betraying his unease. I wanted to tell them how it moved, how its silence felt like a weight pressing on my chest, but the words wouldn't come. You try explaining something that shouldn't exist, something that makes your reality feel like a lie. We searched the basement, every corner, every shadow, but found nothing. The house felt normal again, the sunlight streaming through the windows, mocking our fear. That night, I lay in bed, the memory of the figure looping in my mind. What was it? Why a marching band uniform? Why the bathroom? I pictured its long arms, the way the drum hung motionless, never swaying as it walked. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a shared hallucination, but my sister's face hurt. Terror-mirroring mind said otherwise. You can lie to yourself, but the truth has a way of staring back, unblinking. Years later, I asked her about it, half expecting her to laugh it off. She didn't. I still see it sometimes, she said, her voice low, in dreams, or when I'm alone. That thing wasn't supposed to be here. I started digging, desperate for answers. What if it wasn't random? What if the house knew something we didn't? I remembered a story my cousin once told, about a neighbor who'd lived here decades. I'll be back soon. Ago, a man obsessed with music, always practicing his drum in the basement. He'd died young, an accident, or so they said. I wondered if he'd left something behind, something that didn't belong to this world. You ever hear a story that feels too close, like it's reaching for you? I never found proof, but the thought stuck, a splinter in my mind. The house was old, its walls thick with secrets, and the basement was where those secrets breathed. Now, I'm older, but the memory hasn't faded. It's not the kind of thing you forget, not when it changes how you see the world. I can still picture the figures, slow, deliberate steps, the gleam of its buttons, the drum that never made a sound. I avoid basements when I can, not because I'm scared, but because I know what it feels like to see something that doesn't fit, something that makes you question everything. You tell me, what's worse, seeing a monster, or knowing it saw you first? I don't think I'll ever know why it was there, why it chose that day, that moment, to step into our lives. All I know is it did, and it left a mark, a shadow that follows me, even in the brightest light. Some places hold their secrets so tightly you can feel them pressing against your skin. That summer, I learned this the hard way, in a basement bar that reeked of history and something far darker. It was a place where the air tasted of dust and regret, where every shadow seemed to shift just out of sight. I thought I was just taking a job, a quick gig to fill the quiet months. But what I found there wasn't just a paycheck, was a glimpse into something that still haunts me, a face that refuses to fade from my memory. I'd always been a night owl, thriving in the chaos of bars and clubs, bartending, DJing, bouncing-eyed, done it all, weaving through crowds with a grin and a quick wit. That summer, I was itching for a break, ready to lie low and recharge. But a friend called, her voice buzzing with excitement. She knew a place in the next town over, a historic building being revived after years of silence. Its basement housed a bar, a relic from the Prohibition era, rumored to have hosted Al Capone himself. People had died there, some said violently, and the stories piled up like dust. My friend's friend, Julie, was bartending, and they needed a DJ, maybe a bouncer, too. I didn't think twice. A gig was a gig, and I was curious. I should have known curiosity can lead you places you're not meant to go. The building loomed at the edge of town, its brick facade weathered but proud, like it was daring you to step inside. I arrived a few hours before opening, the late afternoon, sun casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. Julie was waiting outside, her arms crossed, her eyes flicking nervously to the building. "I'm not going in alone," she said, her voice flat but firm. I laughed, thinking she was joking, but her face didn't crack a smile. That was my first warning, but I brushed it off. I'd worked in rough spots before, drunk fights, broken bottles, nothing new. A spooky old building wasn't going to rattle me. We stepped inside, and the air changed. It wasn't just cool or damp, it was heavy, like walking into a room where an argument had just ended. The main floor was quiet, but the basement stairs beckoned, their wooden steps worn smooth by decades of feet. I followed Julie down, my boots echoing in the narrow stairwell, and with every step, I felt it a weight, not on my shoulders, but in my chest. Like the building was pressing its history into me. The basement bar was a time capsule. Dim lights hung from exposed beams, casting a sickly yellow glow over scuffed wooden floors. The bar counter was long and scarred, flanked by stools that looked like they'd heard 1,000 secrets. Pool tables sat in one corner, their felt faded, and shelves lined with old bottles glinted in the half-light. It should have felt charming, nostalgic even, but it didn't. The air was stale, thick with the scent of mildew and something metallic, like old blood. I tried to shake the feeling, focusing on setting up my DJ gear, but my eyes kept drifting to the corners, where shadows seemed to pulse. Julie was on edge, and it wasn't just first-day jitters. She wouldn't even go to the restroom alone, asking me to stand guard outside the door. "Don't look," she muttered, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. I stood there, back turned, staring at the cracked tiles, and felt it again, that weight, like eyes boring into me from somewhere I couldn't see. Julie noticed it too. "They're watching us," she said, her words barely above a whisper. I wanted to laugh, to call it nonsense, but the hair on my arms stood up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was right. We waited in the small office for the owners, a cramped room with peeling wallpaper and a single flickering bulb. I tried to make small talk, asking Julie about the bar, but my voice sounded hollow, swallowed by the silence. That's when I heard its low, deliberate footsteps above us, pacing across the floorboards of the main floor. My heart skipped up, beat, and I glanced at Julie. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, like she'd seen a ghost. "That's not normal," she whispered, her voice shaking. I stood, ready to check it out, but she grabbed my arm, her grip tight. "Don't. Just don't." The footsteps stopped, but the silence was worse. Then came another sound, something heavy dragging across the floor above, like a chair or a table being pulled with purpose. It went on for what felt like forever, each scrape vibrating through the walls, through my bones. I told myself it was the owners, maybe movers, anything rational, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The building was locked, empty except for us. Julie's eyes were locked on the ceiling, her breath shallow, and I realized she wasn't just scared, she was terrified. The owner arrived eventually, a cheerful man with a booming laugh that felt out of place. He brushed off the noises, joking about his old drinking buddies in the walls. He told stories of his own whispers he'd heard, lights flickering when he was alone, but his grin never wavered, like it was all part of the bar's charm. I wanted to believe him, to chalk it up to an overactive imagination, but the air in that basement didn't lie. It was alive, and it wasn't friendly. The night was slow, painfully so. The bar was in a small town, far from the main drag, and word of its reopening hadn't spread far. A few locals trickled in, their voices low, their eyes darting to the shadows. I spun tracks, kept the mood light, but every laugh felt forced, every pause too long. The whole time, I felt it, those unseen eyes, watching from the dark, waiting for us to slip. We closed around midnight, locking up and cleaning in a hurry. I helped Julie wipe down the bar, stacked chairs, anything to get out faster. The owner left first, waving as he climbed the stairs, and Julie and I followed our footsteps, loud in the empty space. I was almost at the door when I felt it again, prickling at the back of my neck, like someone was standing too close. I didn't look back. I couldn't. We stepped outside, the night air cool and sharp, and I breathed easier, thinking it was over. I was wrong. As I walked to my car, something made me glance up at the building, just a quick look. That's when I saw Ida, face pale and expressionless, pressed against the second-floor window. Its eyes were empty, black voids that seemed to swallow the moonlight. It wasn't moving, wasn't blinking, just staring straight at me. My blood turned to ice, and I froze, my keys dangling in my hand. The air in my car felt thick, my chest tight, like the face was pulling the breath from me. I blinked, and it was gone, the window empty, reflecting only the night sky. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the wheel. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a reflection, anything but what I knew it was. But that face stayed with me, burned into my mind, its stare following me through every dark corner of my dreams. I never went back to that bar. Julie called a few days later, asking if I'd seen anything, her voice small and scared. I didn't tell her about the face. I couldn't. Some things are too heavy to share. That building is still there, I hear, still serving drinks to those brave enough to descend its stairs. But I wonder if they feel it too, the weight of those eyes, the secrets buried in the walls. I wonder if they look up at the windows when they leave, and what they see staring back. Every step down those basement stairs felt like crossing into a forgotten world, where the air grew thick with secrets too heavy to name. I lived in an old military house somewhere in the United States. Its location stays private, locked away like the memories that still haunt me. The house wasn't much to look at. Weathered brick, sagging shutters, a porch that groaned underfoot. But the basement? That was something else entirely. It wasn't just a room below the earth. It was a place where time seemed to pause, where shadows held their breath, waiting for you to notice them. I'd been there a few years, raising my son, navigating a marriage that frayed with every passing day. The basement was where I did laundry, stored old boxes, and sometimes just stood, staring into the dark, feeling the weight of something I couldn't explain. It started on the third to last stair. Every time I descended, my feet would slow, my heart would stutter, and an invisible force would tug at my gaze, pulling it toward the farthest corner of the room. I fought it at first, telling myself it was just the dim light, the damp air, the way old houses play tricks on your mind. But the pull was relentless, like a whisper in my bones, urging me to look. And when I did, I saw him, a soldier, dressed in a Korean-era uniform, olive drab, faded, the kind you'd see in sepia photographs. He hung from the rafters, his body still, his face obscured by shadows. The rope was taut, the beam above unyielding. It wasn't fear that hit me first, it was sorrow. His presence wasn't menacing, not like the stories you hear of vengeful spirits. No, this was different. It was as if he carried a grief so deep, it seeped into the walls, into me. I'd stand there, frozen, my breath shallow, feeling the ache of a life cut short. I never ran, never screamed. Something about him felt familiar, like a guardian I hadn't yet met. I started to piece together his story, not from facts, but from the fragments my heart seemed to know. He was a good man once, I told myself. A soldier who survived the war, only to come home to an empty house. His wife gone, his child taken, his world shattered. The basement must have been his refuge. the place where he faced his final moments, where despair won. But he didn't leave. He stayed tethered to this house, not to haunt, but to watch over it. Over us. Let take you back to a night that changed everything. My son was 9 months old, a fragile bundle of warmth in a crib down the hall. I was asleep, or thought I was, when a voice cut through the darkness, sharp, urgent, not my own. Check on him. My eyes snapped open, my body rigid. I lay there, heart pounding, trying to convince myself it was a dream, but then I felt it. Wet, insistent nudges against my wrist. Our dog, a scruffy mutt who never left my side, was licking me, tugging at my sleeve, pulling me toward my son's room. I stumbled out of bed, the floor cold against my bare feet, and ran. When I reached his crib, my son was gasping, his tiny chest heaving, his face pale. Panic clawed at me as I scooped him up, his body limp in my arms. I don't remember the drive to the hospital, only the blur of headlights, the sterile smell of the doctor's voices. He spent a week there, hooked to machines, but he survived. He's almost 19 now, tall and strong, with no memory of that night. But I'll never forget it. That voice wasn't mine. It was his. The soldier, watching from the shadows, had saved my son. The soldier's presence grew stronger after that, woven into the fabric of our lives. My husband, though, felt it differently. He was a man quick to anger, his words sharp, his hands sometimes raised. But in that house, something held him back. He'd yell, his voice echoing through the rooms. But then he'd stop, his face paling, his eyes darting to corners where no one stood. One night, he confessed to me, his voice low, almost afraid. Every time I get mad, it's like someone's standing behind me, heavy, like they're daring me to keep going. I didn't say a word. I knew who it was. Then came the night he crossed a line. We were arguing in the kitchen, the kind of fight that leaves you hollow. He raised his hand, his face twisted with rage, and I braced myself. But before he could strike, a picture frame, a heavy, wooden thing with a photo of us on our wedding day, tore itself from the wall. It flew across the room, striking him square in the temple. He staggered, blood trickling down his face, and collapsed to his knees. He needed stitches, 7 of them, and he never raised his hand again. The frame lay on the floor, the glass cracked, but the photo untouched. I felt him then, the soldier, his presence like a shield around me. Living with him, the soldier, wasn't just about protection. It was about connection. I'd talk to him sometimes, late at night, when the house was still. I'd sit on the basement stairs, the darkness pressing against me, and whisper my fears, my hopes. I told him about my son, about the fights, about the weight of carrying a family alone. I don't know if he heard me, but I felt lighter afterward, like he was listening. But seeing him hanging there, night after night, broke something in me. It wasn't fear, it was pain. I couldn't bear the thought of him trapped in that moment, reliving his final act. One evening, I stood at the foot of the stairs, my voice trembling but firm. "I know you're here," I said. "I'm grateful for you, for everything you've done. But it hurts to see you like this. You don't have to show yourself this way anymore. You're more than that moment." The air shifted, softer somehow, like a sigh I couldn't hear. After that, he never appeared as the hanging figure again. The basement still felt heavy, but it was different, less like a tomb, more like a sanctuary. My husband, though, wasn't so lucky. He'd go down there to grab tools or boxes, and come back pale, his hands shaking. "He's still there," he'd mutter, refusing to meet my eyes. "Hanging, just like before." I didn't argue. I knew the soldier was protecting me, showing my husband what he needed to see. Let me tell you about another moment, one I haven't shared with anyone. It was a quiet afternoon, my son napping upstairs, the house bathed in golden light. I was folding laundry in the basement, the hum of the dryer, a soft backdrop. I felt him before I saw him, not the hanging figure, but a presence, warm, almost tangible. I looked up, and for a moment, the shadows in the corner seemed to shimmer, like sunlight on water. I smiled, my heart full, and whispered, "Thank you." The air pulsed, gentle, like a heartbeat, and then it was gone. I stood there, tears in my eyes, feeling like I'd just spoken to a friend. When the time came to move, I dreaded leaving him behind. The house had been our shelter, our battleground, our home. On our last day, I went to the basement one final time. The stairs felt different, lighter, as if the weight had lifted. I stood in the center of the room, my voice steady. "We're leaving," I said. "Thank you for watching over us. I hope you find peace wherever you are." I turned to go, my chest tight, and then I felt a faint brush against my shoulder, like a hand resting there for just a moment. As I walked to the car, my son in my arms, I glanced back at the house. There he was, standing in the dining room window, not hanging, not shadowed, but whole. His uniform was crisp, his face still hidden, but his hand raised in a slow, deliberate wave. I waved back, tears streaming down my face, feeling like I was saying goodbye to someone who'd carried us through the darkest nights. That image stays with me, even now. I think about him often, wondering if he's still in that basement, watching over the next family, or if he finally found his way to the peace he deserved. I hope he did. I hope he's with his child again, in a place where grief can't touch him. But sometimes, when the night is too quiet, I feel that pull again, that whisper in my bones, and I know he's still out there, somewhere, standing guard in the shadows. The moment we stepped into our new home, I felt it a pulse, like the house was breathing, watching us with eyes we couldn't see. It was perfect, everything we'd dreamed of after years of scraping by, but the basement, it held something, alive, something that didn't want us there. We'd fought for this house. My husband, Tom, and I had clawed our way out of a crumbling rental, its walls peeling like old skin, its pipes groaning with every season. We saved every penny, skipped vacations, worked overtime until our bones ached. When we found this place, it was a miracle, a two-story haven with wide windows, polished floors, and a garden that promised new beginnings. The realtor called it well-kept, but I saw more, a future where our son, Ethan, could grow without fear of a leaking roof or creaking debt. We signed the papers with trembling hands, hearts swollen with hope. But the first night, as we unpacked boxes under the glow of a single lamp, I felt a weight settle over me, heavier than exhaustion. It came from below, from the basement. The stairs to that underground world were narrow, the wood worn smooth by decades of footsteps. The light switch at the top flickered, casting jagged shadows that seemed to move on their own. When I descended, the air grew thick, pressing against my chest like damp cloth. The basement was a maze of forgotten things, boxes sagging with mildew, furniture broken into jagged shapes, tools rusted into uselessness. It wasn't just clutter, it was a graveyard of someone else's life, left to rot in the dark. The bulbs overhead were weak, their light barely touching the corners where shadows pooled like ink. I told myself it was just an old house, that the unease was my mind playing tricks after years of stress. But every time I stepped down there, my skin prickled, as if the air itself was brushing against me, testing me. Tom laughed it off when I mentioned it. "You're just tired," he'd say, his voice warm but dismissive. Ethan, though, felt it too. At 8 years old, he'd linger at the top of the stairs, refusing to follow me down. "It's creepy, Mom," he'd whisper, his brown eyes. Wide-eyed nod, ruffle his hair, and promise we'd clear it out soon. But deep down, I knew he was right. There was something in that basement, something that didn't belong to us. I wanted to believe it was just nerves. I wanted to believe we'd make this house our own. But then I'd stand at the edge of those stairs, and the darkness would stare back, whispering in a language I couldn't yet understand. One humid afternoon, as summer clung to the air, Ethan and I tackled the basement's chaos. We dragged boxes to the curb, sorted through tangled extension cords, and laughed to keep the tension at bay. Ethan, ever curious, wandered deeper into the shadows, his flashlight beam dancing across the walls. "Mom, look at this," he called, his voice echoing. I followed, weaving through stacks of debris, and found him standing before a massive cabinet, its wood blackened with age, tucked into a corner so dark it seemed to swallow light. It was ancient, towering over us, its surface carved with faint, swirling patterns that made my eyes ache to follow. The doors were heavy, their hinges rusted but intact, as if they hadn't been touched in decades. Ethan tugged at the handle, and with a groan, the cabinet opened, releasing a puff of stale air that smelled of earth and decay. Inside were relics of a forgotten life, cracked dishes, faded photographs, a child's shoe with a frayed lace. "Just junk," I said, forcing a smile, but my heart thudded unevenly. There was something about that cabinet, something that felt awake. My grandmother used to tell me stories of old furniture, how some pieces held memories or worse, trapped them. She'd speak of a dresser in her childhood home, one that rattled at night, as if the wood itself was trying to speak. I laughed then, a child safe in her warmth. But standing before that cabinet, her words slithered back, curling around my thoughts like smoke. We left the cabinet where it stood, too heavy to move, and went back to our sorting. But that night, as I lay in bed, the image of it lingered, the way its shadows seemed to shift, the way its carvings seemed to writhe when I wasn't looking. I told myself it was nothing, just an old piece of furniture. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd disturbed something, that we'd opened a door we weren't meant to find. Feel the weight of that moment, the way it presses against you, urging you to look closer, to see what's hiding in the dark. The first signs came softly, like whispers in a dream. Ethan started waking us in the dead of night, his voice trembling. "It's the basement, Mom. Something's moving down there." Tom would check, flashlight in hand, and find nothing but silence. "Just the house settling," he'd say, but his eyes lingered on the stairs. I wanted to believe him, to cling to logic, but Ethan's fear was a mirror to my own. Night after night, he'd crawl into our bed, clutching his stuffed bear, describing a rattling sound, like chains dragged across stone. Then I heard it too. It was faint at first, a rhythmic tremor rising through the floorboards, as if the house itself was breathing. I'd lie awake, straining to pinpoint it, and always, it led back to the basement. One night, Tom heard it too, a sharp, insistent rattle, like someone shaking the cabinet doors. We descended together, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was still, the cabinet looming in its corner, its doors closed, but trembling, faintly, as if something inside was testing their strength. Tom yanked them open, revealing the same clutter, but as he did, a wave of nausea crashed over me. It wasn't just sickness, it was fear, raw and primal, sinking into my bones. My skin crawled, as if invisible fingers were brushing against it, and for a moment, I swore I saw the shadows shift, curling inward like a living thing. You're there now, in that basement, the air heavy, the shadows moving just beyond your sight. You feel it, don't you? The way the darkness presses closer, the way it knows you're there, watching, waiting for you to make a move. From that night, our home changed. Objects we'd secured, books, picture frames fell without reason, their crashes echoing in the silence. The walls seemed to hum with life, faint scratches trailing behind them, as if something was clawing its way through. Worst of all were the voices, low, garbled whispers that hovered at the edge of hearing, like a conversation just out of reach. I'd catch fragments, never words, but the tone was unmistakable, hungry, aware, alive. Ethan stopped playing in his room, preferring the living room's bright lights. Tom grew quiet, his laughter replaced by a furrowed brow, and I I felt it watching us, always from below. The air grows colder, thicker, wrapping around you like a shroud. The whispers sharpen, circling, their edges cutting into your thoughts. The walls pulse, the scratches louder now, closer, as if they're right behind you, reaching out. It came on a night when Ethan was at his grandmother's, a small mercy in the storm that followed. The sounds began as always, rattling, soft, at first, then growing, spreading. But this time, they didn't stop. They swelled, a chorus of chaos, rattling, humming, droning, as if the house itself was unraveling. The walls vibrated, the floor trembled, and the air thrummed with a pressure that made my ears ache. It wasn't just sound, it was presence, a force that filled every corner, every shadow, until the house felt alive, screaming. We huddled in our bedroom, Tom's arm around me, our breaths shallow. The noise was everywhere, above, below, within. I tried to speak, to pray, but my voice drowned in the cacophony. And then, in the corner, I saw it. A figure, tall and formless, its edges bleeding into the dark. No face, just a void where one should be, staring with an intensity that burned. I blinked, and it was gone, but its weight lingered, pressing against my chest, stealing my air. Tom didn't see it, but he felt it too. His grip tightened, his eyes wide with a fear I'd never seen. That moment, that shadow, it's burned into me now. Every time I close my eyes, I feel it again, the void, the stare, the house alive with rage. It's not just a memory, it's a mark, a reminder that we're not alone. The noise lasted an hour, maybe more, until it faded into a silence so heavy it felt like grief. We didn't sleep. We couldn't. The next day, I scoured the internet, called friends, reached out to anyone who might know what to do. I'd never believed in the paranormal, not fully, but now I knew. Something was here, something real, something that wanted us to know it was watching. We're trapped, financially bound to this house, unable to flee. I've contacted a spiritual expert, a paranormal team, anyone who might help. But every night, as the house settles into silence, I feel it waiting, biding its time. We wanted a home, a sanctuary. Instead, we found a prison, and the key lies somewhere in that basement, behind those carved doors. In the dark, we can't escape. Every house has its own heartbeat, a rhythm you learn to ignore until it changes. In the basement where I worked, that rhythm wasn't just different. It was alive, deliberate, like a message carved in the dark. It started with a sound so faint, I thought I'd imagined it, but by the end, it wasn't just sound. It was a presence, one that knew my name, my routine, and maybe even my fears. I'm not one for ghost stories, but what happened down there made me question everything I thought I knew about the world. My name is Andy, and a few months ago, I turned our basement into a makeshift office. It wasn't much: a desk shoved against a concrete wall, a rickety chair, and a window letting in slivers of daylight. The basement was quiet, isolated, perfect for focusing on work without the chaos of the main house. My wife and I had lived here for years, and the basement had always been just a storage space, full of boxes and forgotten junk. But when I started working from home, it became my sanctuary. Or so I thought. The first time I noticed something off, it was a Friday morning, the kind of crisp day where the world feels sharp and clear. I was typing away, coffee cooling on my desk, when I heard it: 3 soft taps, like someone rapping their knuckles on wood. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The sound was close, maybe from the wall behind me, but I couldn't pinpoint it. I glanced at the window, thinking it might be a branch or a neighbor, but the yard was empty, the street silent. I told myself it was nothing. Houses settle, pipes shift, old buildings breathe, but the hairs on my neck stood up, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the sound wasn't random. I didn't mention it to my wife. She'd always been sensitive to the house's quirks, once burning white sage down here because she said it felt off. Our cat used to stand at the top of the stairs and wail. Not meow, but scream, whenever we were in the basement. After the sage, the cat calmed down, and I'd laughed it off as her being dramatic. But that morning, as I sat alone, the memory of that cat's scream crept back, and I wondered if I'd been too quick to dismiss her. The next Friday, it happened again. 4 taps this time, louder, more insistent, coming from the same spot about 8 feet away, near the corner where the walls met the ceiling. I stopped mid-sentence, my heart picking up speed. This wasn't a pipe or a settling beam. It was deliberate, like someone was testing me, seeing if I'd react. I stood, walked to the corner, and pressed my hand against the cold concrete. Nothing. No vibration, no warmth, just silence. I checked the window, the ceiling, even outside, but found no explanation. The house was empty. My wife was at work, the cat upstairs. I sat back down, my skin prickling, and tried to focus, but my eyes kept darting to that corner. For a while, it stopped. Days passed, then weeks, and I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. I'd laugh at myself, thinking I was letting the basement's gloom get to me. It's just a room, I'd say, concrete and cobwebs, nothing more. But deep down, I knew better. The basement had a way of watching you, not with eyes, but with something heavier, like it was measuring your every move. I started leaving the radio on, low enough to hear, but loud enough to drown out the silence. Silence, I was learning, wasn't always empty. Then, a month or 2 later, the taps returned. Another Friday, just past 11 a.m., I was on a call, half listening to a coworker drone on, when I heard it faint, almost polite, like someone knocking to be let in. I muted my mic, my pulse quickening. The taps were softer this time, but they were there, coming from that same damn corner. I stared at it, willing it to stop, but it didn't. 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. I ended the call early, my hands shaking, and sat there, listening to the house. Nothing else moved, but the air felt different, thicker, like it was holding its breath. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was the furnace, or a mouse, or the house settling in some new way. But none of those fit. The taps were too regular, too human. I thought about my wife's sage, about the cat's screams, and for the first time, I let myself consider something I'd always pushed away. What if there was someone or something here with me? Not a person, not flesh and blood, but something else. Something that knew I was alone every Friday morning. The final straw came today, another Friday, 11:15 a.m. I was on a work call again, trying to focus, when I heard it, not taps this time, but music. A music box, one we'd recently brought down to the basement, started playing. 6 or 8 notes, slow and uneven, like someone was turning the crank for the first time. I froze, my coworker's voice fading into static. The music box was finicky. Sure, it might play a note if you bumped it, but this wasn't a bump. It was deliberate, each note hanging in the air, sharp and clear. I joked to my coworker, "Ghosts are gonna get me." But my laugh was hollow, and I ended the call as fast as I could. I stared at the music box, a small wooden thing on a shelf, across the room. It hadn't been touched, hadn't been wound. The notes stopped, but the silence that followed was worse, heavy, expectant, like the room was waiting for me to do something. I felt it then, stronger than ever. I wasn't alone. The corner, the one where the taps always came from, seemed darker, the shadows deeper. I couldn't see anything, but I didn't need to. I knew. I stood, my legs unsteady, and spoke into the silence. "If someone's here, I want you to know you've passed on. You're not supposed to be here anymore. It's okay to go." My voice trembled, but I forced the words out, hoping they'd mean something. I don't know if I believed them, but it felt right, like I was acknowledging what I'd been ignoring. The air shifted, lighter somehow, but I couldn't tell if it was real or just my mind grasping for relief. I haven't heard the taps since, or the music box. The basement is quiet again, but it's not the same. Every Friday morning, I brace myself, waiting for that rhythm to return. I don't know what was down here with me, a lost soul, a fragment of the house's past, or something else entirely, but I know it was real, and I know it wanted me to hear it. Some things don't need to scream to make you afraid. Sometimes, a tap is enough, and every time I sit at my desk, I wonder if it's really gone or if it's just waiting, counting the days until the next Friday morning. My name is Andy, and some nights, when the world falls silent, I still feel it, that weight in the dark, those eyes watching from places no light can touch. It began in a house in Pennsylvania, a 2-story suburban dream my parents bought when I was barely 6, the eldest of 4 siblings. I don't claim to know what angels or demons are, nor do I kneel to any god or devil, but I know this: there are things in this world, entities woven into the shadows, that hunger for something human fear, pain, or worse. They found us in that house, and for nearly a decade, they never let go. The house stood proud on a quiet street, its white siding gleaming under summer sun, but its half-finished basement was a different world. The air down there clung to your skin, heavy, like it carried secrets too old to speak. Bare bulbs flickered, casting jagged shadows across concrete walls pocked with cracks. Upstairs, the rooms felt alive with our laughter, our footsteps, our lives. But the basement, it watched, it waited, even at 6. I sensed it a rawness that made my chest tighten when I lingered too long near the stairs. It started with the eyes. My sister, 2 years younger, saw them first. We shared a room upstairs, our beds pushed against opposite walls, a closet between us that never felt empty. One night, she woke me, her voice trembling, pointing at the closet door. There, in the gap where the wood didn't quite meet the frame, 2 red pinpricks glowed, unblinking, like embers in a dying fire. I froze, my blanket clutched to my chin, staring as they held us in their gaze. We screamed, our voices piercing the night, until our parents rushed in, flipping on the light. Rats, we stammered, rats with red eyes. Our mother smoothed our hair, her smile soft but strained. "Just your imagination," she said, but her eyes lingered on the closet, searching. Our father scoffed, calling it childish nonsense, and shut the door. The light chased the eyes away, but not the feeling like something had marked us, like it knew our names. The eyes returned, night after night, always in the dark, always watching. Soon other things followed. I'd lie awake, the house silent, and hear my name drift through the air, spoken by a voice that wasn't my mother's, wasn't my father's, wasn't human. It came from nowhere, everywhere, a low murmur that crawled into my bones. My sister heard it too, her eyes wide as she whispered, "Andy, did you hear that?" We'd huddle together, our breaths shallow, waiting for the voice to speak again. It always did, patient, deliberate, as if savoring our fear. Upstairs became a maze of shadows, corners that seemed to shift when you weren't looking, doorways that felt too narrow, too alive. Our parents tried to shield us. Mother, a Christian with a faith as deep as her love, held our hands and told us to pray. Father, ever the skeptic, rolled his eyes, blaming old pipes or our overactive minds. But even he couldn't explain the objects that fell, books tumbling from shelves, cups slipping from tables, untouched. Doors would swing shut on their own, the air growing thick with a pressure that made your ears ache. My sister and I stopped playing upstairs alone, stopped sleeping without a light. The house no longer felt like ours. It belonged to something else. Mother saw it too, eventually. One evening, as she folded laundry in the kitchen, she froze, her hands trembling. She told us later, her voice barely above a whisper, that she'd felt something behind her, a presence so heavy it stole her breath. She turned, expecting nothing, but saw a shadow flicker across the wall, too tall, too wrong to be human. That night, she called our pastor. He came with a bottle of olive oil, his voice steady as he walked us through every room, reciting prayers, anointing walls with crosses. "This house is God's," he declared. "No evil can stay." We believed him, clung to his words like a lifeline. But the house disagreed. The eyes burned brighter, the voices grew bolder, and the shadows moved closer, as if the prayers had stirred something awake, something angry. By the time I was 9, the basement became my nightmare. I'd avoided it as long as I could, but one night, unable to sleep, I crept downstairs for water. The kitchen was dark, the house still, but the basement door at the end of the hall stood ajar, a sliver of black beyond it. I don't know why I moved toward it, some pull, some need to prove I wasn't afraid. The stairs descended into a void, the single bulb above, casting a sickly glow. Halfway down, I stopped. Something was there, at the bottom, waiting. I felt it before I saw it, a shape, darker than the dark, its edges blurring like smoke. It didn't move, but it saw me. My heart pounded, my legs locked, and then I was falling, pushed by a force I couldn't see. I hit the concrete floor, pain exploding in my knees, my palms. Above me, the door swung shut, sealing me in with whatever waited below. I screamed, clawing at the steps, my voice raw, as I begged for my mother. She found me, her prayers a shield, as she pulled me into the light, but the basement's grip lingered, a cold that never left my bones. Years later, at 12, I faced it again. I was alone in the house, my siblings at school, my parents at work. The basement computer was my only escape, a flickering screen in a sea of shadows. I was typing, lost in a game, when the air shifted, heavy, like a storm about to break. A sound followed a violent crash, not one, but many, as every shelf on the wall collapsed, books and boxes scattering across the floor. I didn't look back. I ran, my feet pounding the stairs, my breath ragged as I burst through the front door into the daylight. I sat on the curb, shaking, until my parents returned. They found nothing, no broken shelves, no scattered debris, just the basement, silent, waiting, as if it had cleaned itself to mock me. The worst came when I was 13. I woke in the middle of the night, the room bathed in the TV's blue glow. My sister slept across from me, her breathing soft, unaware. But something stood over her bed, a figure, tall and formless, its edges dissolving into the dark. It wasn't human, wasn't anything I could name, but it was real, solid in its wrongness. It turned, slowly, and I felt its gaze, not eyes, but a weight, pressing on my chest, stealing my air. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, my body betraying me as the figure leaned closer. My sister stirred, and it vanished, but the pressure remained. A memory burned into my soul. I hid under my covers, praying until dawn, but sleep never came. I don't know if I fainted, or if the fear simply broke me, but that night changed me. I wasn't a child anymore. I was a survivor. When I was 14, our cousins moved in. Their grandparents, our caretakers, had fallen ill, and our grandmother passed soon after. The house grew crowded, but the fear grew stronger. My cousins felt it too, the eyes, the voices, the shadows that moved when no one watched. We stopped sleeping alone, huddling in the living room, listening to furniture shift in empty rooms, footsteps pacing above us. Our pastor returned, his prayers louder, his oil thicker, but the house only laughed, its darkness feeding on our pain. My parents fought, their voices sharp, their love fraying. Mother spiraled into addiction, her faith crumbling under the weight of what we faced. Father, once a skeptic, grew quiet, his eyes haunted. The house wasn't just a place anymore. It was a predator, and we were its prey. We left when I was 15. We packed in silence, the house watching, its air thick with anger. As we drove away, I looked back, half expecting to see those red eyes in the windows. We moved to a townhome with father, a place too new to hold such darkness. But the scars remained. My sister and I still talk, late at night, when the world is quiet. We remember the eyes, the voices, the figure over her bed. No one else understands. Not fully. You, listening now, might feel it too. The chill, the weight, the sense that something watches, even in your own home. One, avoid basements, attics, any place where shadows pool too deep. I can't sleep in total darkness, not without feeling those eyes, red and unblinking, waiting for me to look back. That house wasn't just haunted, it was alive, feeding on our fear, our pain, our brokenness. I don't know what those entities were, but they were real, and they left their mark. Close your eyes now and feel it, the quiet, the dark, the weight of something just out of sight. My sister and I survived, but we'll never be free. Not really. My hands trembled as I loaded the washing machine, the dim basement light flickering like a heartbeat, struggling to stay alive. I was alone with Kat, my patient, upstairs, or so I thought. Then, a shadow shifted behind me, silent as death. I turned, and there she was, her blank eyes boring into mine. Standing where no sound of footsteps should have come. The house was old, its bones groaning under the weight of decades. As a home CNA, I'd seen my share of creaky floors and drafty rooms, but this place was different. It wasn't just the peeling paint or the stale air that clung to my skin. It was the way the house seemed to watch me, its silence heavier than any noise. I cared for Kat, a woman in her late 70s, her mind frayed by dementia. She spent her days in a faded armchair, staring at a TV that droned on about game shows and soap operas. My job was simple: keep her safe, manage her meds, do the chores. But the basement, where the washer and dryer lived, was a place I dreaded. Its narrow stairs twisted down into a cavern of shadows, the air thick with something I couldn't name. That first day, I dismissed the unease as nerves. I'd been working long shifts, juggling Kat's care with my own life unraveling at the seams. The basement was just a room, I told myself, nothing more. But as I tossed clothes into the machine, the light above me pulsed, dimming for a heartbeat before flaring back. I froze, my breath catching. The air grew colder, not the chill of a draft, but a deep, invasive cold that seeped into my bones. I turned, expecting nothing, but there was Kat. She stood at the foot of the stairs, her thin frame rigid, her eyes empty as twin voids. No sound, no creak of the stairs, no shuffle of her slippers. She was just there, like she'd been carved from the darkness itself. Kat. My voice cracked, barely a whisper. She didn't blink, didn't move. Her gaze pinned me in place, and for a moment, I felt like prey. I forced a smile, guiding her back upstairs, my hand trembling on her arm. The stairs screamed under our weight, each step a protest, as if the house itself resented our escape. I settled her in her chair, her eyes locking onto the TV, but my heart wouldn't slow. How had she come down without a sound? Those stairs were loud enough to wake the dead. The memory of that moment lingered like a bruise. I told myself it was her dementia, a lapse in her awareness, but the house wouldn't let me forget. A few days later, I was back in the basement, switching laundry. The air was heavier this time, pressing against my chest. As I pulled clothes from the washer, the stairs above me groaned, slow and deliberate, like someone testing each step. My pulse spiked. Kat again. I turned, expecting her frail silhouette, but the stairs were empty. The light flickered, casting jagged shadows across the concrete walls. I rushed upstairs, my breath ragged, and found Kat in her chair, her eyes glued to the screen, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She hadn't moved. Something else had. The thought clawed at me, refusing to let go. I tried to focus on my tasks: folding laundry, checking Kat's meds, but the house felt alive, its walls pulsing with a rhythm I couldn't hear. That night, I stayed close to Kat, avoiding the basement, but the unease followed me, a shadow, trailing my every step. I remembered a story my grandmother used to tell about a house in her village where the dead lingered, watching the living through cracks in the walls. She'd said they weren't always angry, but they were always hungry for attention, for fear, for life. I shook the thought away, but it clung to me, a whisper in the dark. The next incident came in the basement restroom, a cramped space tucked behind the laundry room. I'd been avoiding it, but my stomach had other plans. As I sat there, the air grew thick, the light above me humming like a trapped insect. The door was ajar, the laundry hanging outside swaying slightly, though no breeze stirred the room. Then, the light died. Darkness swallowed me, sudden and absolute. Through the hanging sheets, I saw it, a silhouette, tall and wrong, standing just beyond the fabric. My heart stopped. I fumbled for the switch, my fingers shaking, and when the light flared back, the room was empty. No figure, no movement, just the clothes hanging still. I ran upstairs, my legs weak, and collapsed beside Kat, her presence the only anchor in the storm of my fear. What was in this house? I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just Kat's mind unraveling, it was the house itself, peeling back its layers to reveal something older, something aware. I started avoiding the basement altogether, rushing through any task that took me away from Kat. But the house wasn't done with me. One afternoon, I used the upstairs bathroom, the only one on the second floor. As I washed my hands, a sound came from behind me, a low guttural murmur, too close, too real. Words I couldn't make out, but they carried weight, like a command, meant for me. I spun around, my reflection in the mirror, pale and wide-eyed. Nothing, just the rug, the sink, the closed door. I stepped back, my foot catching on the rug, and I fell, my head striking the floor. Pain bloomed, but fear was stronger. I scrambled out, my breath hitching, and ran to Kat. She was calm, her eyes on the TV, but something in her posture felt wrong. That day, she didn't ask me to leave, as she often did in her confusion. Instead, she spoke to someone else. "Vanessa, you need to go." Her voice was sharp, laced with fear. I froze. There was no one else in the house. "Vanessa, please, leave us alone." Kat's hands twisted in her lap, her eyes darting to corners where nothing stood. I knelt beside her, my voice soft. "Kat, it's just us. You're safe." But her gaze didn't meet mine. She was seeing something gay. COULD, and single quotes T. Vanessa. The name echoed in my mind, a key to a lock I didn't want to open. I remembered another patient I'd cared for, years ago, who'd spoken of a sister who'd died in their childhood home. She'd said the house never let her go, that her sister's shadow followed her, whispering in the quiet moments. Was Vanessa Kat's ghost tied to this house, to her fractured mind? Or was she something else, something that had always been here, waiting? The thought sent a shiver through me, cold and sharp. Each shift became a test of endurance. I moved through the house like a trespasser, every shadow a threat, every silence a trap. Kat's pleas for Vanessa to leave grew more frequent, her anxiety a mirror to my own. I tried to rationalize it, her dementia, my stress, the old house playing tricks. But the pieces didn't fit. The silent stares, the creaking when no one moved, the figure in the dark, the whisper in my ear, they were too real, too connected. I started researching, digging into the house's history, but found nothing. No deaths, no tragedies, just a quiet home that had stood for decades. Yet the air told a different story, thick with secrets it wouldn't share. One night, as I sat beside Kat, her hand gripped mine, her eyes clear for the first time in weeks. "She doesn't like you here," she said, her voice low. "Vanessa, she wants me, but she doesn't want you." My blood ran cold. I didn't ask who Vanessa was. I didn't need to. The house answered for her, its walls seeming to lean closer, its shadows deeper. I stayed until my shift ended, my heart pounding, and when I left, I felt eyes on my back, watching from the windows. I'm still showing up for Kat, but each day chips away at my courage. I've thought about bringing in a priest, a medium, anyone who might understand what's here. I've even considered quitting, but Kat needs me, and abandoning her feels like betraying the one thing keeping me grounded. The house is alive, I'm sure of it, and Vanessa, whatever she is its voice. I don't know if she's a ghost, a memory, or something worse, but she's watching, waiting, and I'm running out of time to find out what she wants.